Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll just get set up here in a couple minutes and we'll get started right at the top of the hour. In the meantime, while we're waiting here, why don't you tell me in the chat where you're calling in from, what your role on projects is, the types of projects you work on. So I'm located here in central Canada. It's actually nice and sunny and warming up a little bit. We've gotten a lot of snow in the last few days, but it's actually warming up and starting to melt. So let me know where you're calling in from. Everyone's got the chat pulled up there, you can see. Here, let's just check. Oh yeah, see some comments coming in. So my background is I'm an electrical engineer. I've been working on projects for quite a while in the power industry, aerospace industry. I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. Wastewater treatment plant industry, so focusing on process commissioning and energy commissioning, some complex projects, some complex aerospace projects. Good to see everyone. Alex from New Jersey, Chattanooga, Florida. Oh yeah, Florida's nice this time of year. I'll actually be in Florida next week. We're just passing through Miami next Saturday, so looking forward to that. All right, so let's let me just share my screen. I see Ahmed has raised his hand. Just shoot your question in the chat there and I'll help you out. Okay, share screen. And it looks like we're working. Awesome. Hi, Ahmed. I see you there. Okay, so let's get started. Today's discussion is on how to plan and execute capital project commissioning. It's really, the focus is so that we can stop losing time at the end of projects during commissioning. We want to set commissioning up for success. I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to get the #1 project management framework that's required to lead and manage commissioning. So this presentation is meant to be interactive, just like we've been doing. Pull up the chat window, shoot me any questions you've got as we go through the material. I'll watch the chat here. I'll get your questions answered. We'll also have a Q&A at the end. So if you want to hold on to your questions and ask them then, that's fine too. But now or later, anytime, just jump in, shoot your question in the chat, and we'll get your question answered here on commissioning. Now, I've used the commissioning project management frameworks we're going to discuss today on several projects. As I was briefly discussing there, I've used these project management frameworks in the power industry, working on generation and transmission projects. I've used these same frameworks in the aerospace industry, building satellites and rockets for the Canadian Space Agency. I've also used these same project management frameworks for commissioning in the wastewater treatment plant industry, expanding and upgrading a facility not too far from here. I'm also on the organizing committee for the Commissioning Professionals Society, where we host an annual event of the world's best commissioning leaders to discuss the challenges that are faced in the industry, as well as how can we elevate the importance of commissioning on projects. So it's a great event. You should definitely check it out. And I'm not the only one getting results with this approach to commissioning. Through our training programs at the Commissioning Academy, I've helped several others get these same results as well. For example, Sheldon or Jonold or Kale or several others, we've had a few hundred people go through our program. And after joining the program, they all tell me that this was an eye-opener. They had no idea what was fully involved to plan and execute commissioning. They also tell me that this was the most interesting and applicable course they've taken in years, with lots of practical information. This is not theoretical stuff based out of a textbook. They also tell me that this is the first commissioning explanation they've found that truly matches what really happens at site. And that's because it is. It's based on real world experience. This isn't textbook stuff. So I know this is great stuff and it's helping a lot of people, and it can definitely help you and your projects as well. So just to be clear though, this is not technical commissioning. If you're here looking to figure out how to do an electrical high pot test, or if you're looking for a building commissioning specific HVAC test and balance standards, this is not ASHRAE, this is not NEBB. If you're looking for specific pipe flushing standards for the food processing industry, you're not going to find any of that here. That's not what this presentation is about. But technical commissioning is not actually what's missing on projects, though, is it? There's a lot of smart people working on projects, and they'll get testing completed one way or the other. What's missing on projects are all of the project management aspects that are supposed to go around the technical commissioning. What's missing are the systems and controls to manage commissioning starting much earlier in projects. Let's look at a simple org chart. Of course, there's three main functions that exist on a project, right? You need to get it designed, you need to get it built during construction, and you need to get it tested during commissioning to make sure everything's working. Or if you have a different contract structure, if you have an EPC contract, design and construction may be part of the same group, if that's the case as well. But this applies to either contract structure or really any type of contract delivery method on your projects. Too often, though, commissioning is tucked under one of these existing groups. Maybe your design groups may be responsible for commissioning to make the stuff work at the end, or commissioning is just another sub-activity to construction, just like any other subcontractor that's part of the overall general contracting process. Projects are often structured this way right from the beginning in contracts, and they're already in trouble before they even start. There is typically someone that's on the project responsible to manage design, and there's always someone responsible to manage construction. There's an entire industry dedicated to construction management. But where are the project management processes to lead and manage commissioning? On a lot of projects, they don't even exist. There's a gap in the industry. Commissioning is really still in its infancy. Of course, we've been doing commissioning for decades, but it's only recently that commissioning is being recognized as its own discipline and recognized as a primary function to successfully complete projects. Some industries are ahead of others in this regard. The aerospace industry, for example, commissioning of the James Webb Space Telescope is some of the most advanced practices of commissioning, and you can check out some of the other information I've presented on commissioning of the James Webb Space Telescope. So aerospace industry is, of course, quite advanced. The oil and gas industry is advanced in some of these project management processes for commissioning due to the significant safety hazards or the logistical challenges of working off seas. So the oil and gas industry has progressed quite well in developing some of these processes for commissioning of their projects. But commissioning as a discipline is only now starting to emerge in several other industries. Now, commissioning is complex. Both the technical aspects are complex and the project management aspects are complex. And I will say, you can't learn technical commissioning in a course. The only way to learn technical commissioning is to be part of an experienced team and get that hands-on experience with people that have done it before and are aware of the safety hazards to make sure that this is done safely. It's just too dangerous. There isn't anyone out there that's going to tell you how to do, say, a high voltage short circuit test on a large synchronous condenser and then send you on your way and see how you do. It's just not going to happen. It's like a kid riding a bike. She's not going to learn to ride a bike by reading a book. She's got to get on the bike. She's got to get the bumps and bruises if she wants to figure it out. Now, there is a distinction between technical commissioning and commissioning project management, and they do require different skill sets. And when it comes to commissioning project management, you can learn this and you must learn this in advance before trying to lead or manage commissioning. It's similar to surgery. Do you want a surgeon that's in the operating room and figuring out how to do this as he goes? Of course not. You want the surgeon who has studied the process and knows the exact steps to follow, including when something goes wrong. It is way too risky to figure out how to manage commissioning on the fly. There's just too much time and money at stake on projects, right? And it's not reasonable to expect the technical commissioning guys to figure this out. By the time they're involved later in the project, it's already too late in the project and there's no time to recover. And they have their own tasks to complete anyways. And the bad decisions earlier in the project have already been made. For project managers, they especially need to know how to properly manage commissioning. And I would honestly say that finishing projects during commissioning should be a project manager's most fundamental role to make sure the project can actually finish on time. But it's not project managers' fault that they don't understand the commissioning process either. This stuff isn't explained in any project management literature that's out there. Completing projects during commissioning is not well understood by a lot of people. So with this gap in the industry and this missing commissioning project management function on a lot of projects, it's no wonder that projects are often late and over budget. And this gap is what we help you fill on projects. This presentation is for project managers that need to understand how to finish projects during commissioning, and also for technical commissioning experts that want to move up in projects to lead or manage commissioning. With the gap that exists in the industry, with no systems and controls to manage commissioning, projects are just gambling. You have no way to affect the outcome of your project. You roll the dice and hope for the best at the end. It's crapshoot. I'm going to show you how to finish projects during commissioning with much more predictability. And at the end of this presentation, if you'd like some more help, I'll show you how with our Commissioning Academy program. So if that all sounds interesting, then I'm glad you're here. I want to share some statistics with you that are quite concerning. Professor Bent Flyvbjerg, that's a picture of him up on the screen. He's from the University of Oxford, and he has a database of over 16,000 projects that he's compiled over the last several decades. He's also written a book. It's called How Big Things Get Done. And if you haven't read it, you should. It's an excellent book. It talks about all the things that go wrong on projects and why they typically fail. From Professor Bent Flyvbjerg's research, it shows that only 8.5% of projects are on time and on budget. That means over 90% of projects are late and over budget. That's terrible. That's almost as bad as the weather forecast industry. They're always wrong. There, of course, are lots of contributing factors to this underperformance. There's lots of civil challenges on projects with unknown underground conditions, heavy civil equipment, and large productivity issues, huge labor forces. There's lots of challenges there, and I don't want to discount any of those challenges. There's experts working on projects that focus on these aspects and manage these aspects of the projects very well. There's, of course, procurement delays, getting equipment to site, long lead items with 6 months or more lead time. There's lots of challenges getting equipment to site. I don't want to discount any issues there for sure. Construction productivity, if there's huge concrete placement requirements and meeting those daily requirements, absolutely, there's lots of challenges there as well. And I don't want to discount any of those challenges that exist on projects. However, the complexity of completing projects during commissioning is one of the main contributions to delays when there are no systems and controls to manage commissioning. I'm going to show you how to do this on your projects so you can beat these odds and improve your project success. So is this making sense? Is there any comments or questions before we move on? Shoot them in the chat. Does any of these statistics concern you? Have you heard some of these statistics before? I see there's a couple comments here. I've been on projects that had no allowance for commissioning. Absolutely, yep. That's what we definitely want to avoid, where everything's late and a scramble at the end. Tornubari says, this, in my opinion, will be interesting. Absolutely, yep. This is a great presentation, and I'm glad you're enjoying it so far. So let's move on and get into some more stuff here. The first thing a lot of people want to know is what to do. They just say, give me the checklist, give me the procedures. I just want the 6-page document that shows me how to commission, for example, a combustion gas turbine. Or they just tell me what software to use. If you give me the right software, then I'll be able to manage my project. I'll just follow that. I often get these questions. And when I hear these questions, I already know these projects are in trouble, because there's a little bit more to it than that. You're not going to get the 6-page document that tells you how to do all this stuff. It's just a little bit more complex than that. So first, let's address the problems of what not to do before we talk about what to do. Projects are having problems. We know this. The data shows us that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. Projects are losing time during commissioning and they're missing deadlines. But why is this? Why are projects struggling? We need to address these problems before I teach you what to do. There are 3 common mistakes, and just by fixing these 3 common mistakes, you will see huge improvements on your projects. Roger's saying, I was on $165 million waste and water treatment project and had a single activity in the schedule commissioning 1 month. Yep, it's all too common, isn't it? We see that on a lot of projects where there's just no thought or planning or any of the project management processes that are required. Commissioning is an afterthought. Leave it to the end. We'll figure it out later. Never works. So what are these 3 mistakes that exist on projects? Mistake number 1, exactly what Roger's saying. We've been told commissioning takes place at the end of projects. You need to finish construction and test everything at the end, right? But this is actually not true. This is, of course, what a lot of projects do, just like Roger is saying there. They roll the dice at the end and hope for the best. And maybe you've had this experience. Roger has had this experience. But this is what leads to problems on projects. In fact, to be successful, the commissioning process starts right at the beginning during your feed processes. When commissioning is left to the end of your project, there's no way to be proactive. All problems are left to the end of your project, and there's no time to recover. It's exactly like Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. We must be doing this on capital projects and having commissioning project management processes right from the start. There's no way to successfully finish projects unless you start preparing in advance. All projects that have ever finished on time and on budget, this is what they're doing. They're implementing commissioning project management right at the beginning of projects. And I'm going to show you how to do this. Mistake number 2. On many projects, there's one group that's tasked with commissioning. Maybe commissioning is part of construction as another sub-activity, or maybe commissioning is the design group's responsibility to figure out. But this never works. Commissioning is not an individual effort. Commissioning must be treated as its own discipline with all project groups involved. Each project group has their primary role, of course. The design guys, they need to focus on getting the systems designed, and we need their expertise to do this and focus on design. And construction groups, they need to focus on their primary activities of getting all the equipment installed and completing construction. We need these groups to focus on their primary responsibilities and what their zone of genius is. But when we give them the responsibility of commissioning as well, of course they're going to leave it to later. They need to focus on their primary role, and they're going to defer commissioning to later, exactly like Roger is saying, right? And this is what causes commissioning to be forgotten about until it's too late. Lane is saying, I try to start during the feed, and the status quo is to wait till the end. Absolutely, that is the industry norm. It's plagued the construction industry for decades, and that's what we need to break some of those industry norms and implement commissioning project management on projects. We'll walk through that here shortly. Instead, commissioning requires a one-team approach, right? With everyone focused on their primary responsibility and everyone involved in commissioning. Think about it. All the subsystems need to come together as one functioning plant process or one functioning system at the end of your project. And the project groups working on the project must do the same to all come together at the end for commissioning. All groups, of course, have a role on commissioning. The construction groups, they may be involved in some of the vendor startups or pre-commissioning activities. Design groups are involved. That's where a lot of the subject matter experts come from to verify that the equipment and systems are functioning as the original design intended. There's going to be consultants involved, the clients involved, operations involved. Everybody comes together as one commissioning group at the end and one commissioning team. That means we have one commissioning process, regardless of what group you're part of. One process to follow, one team approach, and one final finish of your project. Unfortunately, when commissioning is a sub-activity to one group, this leads to a conflict of interest, right? You can't have the fox guard the hen house. Think about it. There's lots of time and money involved in projects. There's lots of cost pressures, there's lots of schedule pressures, and when groups are under pressure to deliver, it's human nature to try and cut corners, right? They have their primary objective to try and meet, and they're going to do naturally what they need to do to meet those objectives. So it's not anyone's fault, but you can't have one group verifying their own work. All projects that are successful with commissioning, they have one team with everyone involved, one commissioning process, and one final in-service date. This, of course, is extremely challenging on projects because everyone belongs to different organizations and there's contracts that in their nature divide everybody up into different groups. So how do you keep everyone aligned for successful commissioning? I'm going to show you how. Mistake number 3, on many projects, they're still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning. They've got paper sign-offs, or they've got their all singing, all dancing customized spreadsheet that they've been using for years to manually track commissioning. And maybe this used to work 20 years ago, but projects are far too complex now. There's too many documents that are generated. There's too much information, and it's just impossible to keep track of everything manually. Besides, we need real-time data to make informed decisions. We can't wait until Friday's spreadsheet update to get the most recent snapshot of where everything is on the project. We need access to information now, that if something's planned to be done that day, we need to know by 3 o'clock, did it actually get done, so that we can reset and plan for tomorrow. When the right systems are implemented, this access to information is available to give you the information you need to make real-time decisions on projects. Even if you've used commissioning software in the past and it was no good, there are much better options available now that are sophisticated to manage today's complex projects. There are actually over 20 different software vendors on the market. Each has its own pros and cons, but they're all flexible to meet your project-specific needs. This is something we do review in our Commissioning Academy program, is how to select the right one for your specific projects. If you don't already have this list, it's available on our website, but you can also go to learncsu.com and you can download it directly. There's a link at the bottom of that page where you can access the spreadsheet. Go to learncsu.com and you can get this list of 20 software vendors. How do you determine commissioning budget? Rule of thumb, normally say for less complex projects must be 3.5% of project cost, and complex budget is 25% of the total cost of the project. So I've never seen commissioning cost that much as 25% of the project. Typically, the rule of thumb is between 3 and 5%. The cost of commissioning on projects is actually quite little. It's insignificant, like 5% of your overall project budget, even on the most complex projects, because the biggest cost of commissioning is labor. Where commissioning becomes hugely expensive is not because of the cost of commissioning itself, it's because of the delays encountered during commissioning and your project burn rate. If you've got a project burn rate that's, say, $1 million a day, or I've worked on projects that are $5 million a day, every day of commissioning is extremely valuable. So when you're getting snagged with small little items, a missing wire, a rolled cable, or things like that, those become expensive cables. If it causes a delay during commissioning, that cable is all of a sudden a $5 million cable. And that's why we need commissioning project management implemented earlier in projects to eliminate these small little snags that are very expensive to address at the end of projects. So when you do implement these CMS software systems, it allows you to plan and manage the work. You can keep track of all the big and all the small details. It's what's used to manage your gated commissioning process and allows you to make those real-time data-driven decisions on projects rather than just guessing. An important aspect is we can't expect everyone on projects to understand commissioning, right? It's complex. Everyone has their own zone of genius in how they contribute to their project. And commissioning is complex. Not everyone is getting to that level of detail to understand the specifics of commissioning. However, we need to have a tool that allows everyone to see how their role contributes to a successful project finish. Everyone needs to understand very clearly what they need to do and when it needs to be done. And CMS software is that tool to guide the team to a strong finish when it's set up properly. Now, software is still not the magic solution that's going to solve all your commissioning problems. It's a tool, right? and it's used to model your commissioning process. Out of the box on its own, it's actually not very helpful until it's configured to meet your project-specific needs. You need to understand these commissioning fundamentals if you want to put the software to good use. If you're missing commissioning project management, you'll not be successful with your commissioning software. We don't want to take a bad commissioning process and digitize it, right? If you're going to use software simply as a database to track your checklists and track your deficiencies, then you know what? You might as well keep your paper and spreadsheet processes. We want to be leveraging the power of these systems to model our commissioning workflows so you can actually manage and track the work and use it as a communication tool to help everybody understand what this project finish is going to look like. I do talk to a lot of commissioning experts that are concerned that project teams are becoming too reliant on the software, that nobody actually understands commissioning to set the tools up properly. I just don't want you to go away thinking that this software list is your answer, because if you try to get one of these systems set up in your project without having well-defined commissioning project management processes, you'll get very frustrated with your new software and probably stop using it. Your project team certainly won't want to use it, and they'll likely very quickly go back to their tried and true paper and spreadsheet processes, and you'll have another failed process improvements. Deliveries are always late and do not meet the ROS date. This is not accounted for and impacts commissioning. Always, absolutely, yep. There's always long lead time items, and everybody assumes that the best case scenario that those dates are going to be met, right? But when we're planning for commissioning, we need to be accounting for some of those items, that if a long lead item, say a 6-month long lead item, turns out to be 8 months, then what are we going to do in our commissioning process as something different or alternative? What's our backup plan, right? Because we're not just going to throw up our hands and stop. We need commissioning to progress in some manner, but what's our plan if that particular item is delayed? How are we going to work around that? And when we have those contingencies and processes built in place, then some inevitable delays can be worked around so that we can still achieve our goals. So we've talked about the 3 common mistakes on projects: not starting with the end in mind, commissioning as a sub-activity, and still using paper and spreadsheets on projects. These are why projects are struggling with commissioning. And if you fix just these 3 things, you'll already have made huge improvements on your projects. When projects are making one or more of these 3 mistakes, though, it's because they lack a project management approach to commissioning. This is what we refer to as cowboy commissioning. It's inefficient, you miss your deadlines, everything is unplanned and unorganized at the end of your project, and it's the reason that your commissioning is a shit show at the end of your projects. It's easy to avoid these mistakes with commissioning project management processes, and I'm going to show you how, so your projects can avoid cowboy commissioning. So I see some good questions. If there's any more, shoot them in the chat. We'll get them answered before we move on to the next section here. So there's several problems that you're probably experiencing on projects that are the symptoms of cowboy commissioning. Your transition from construction to commissioning is disorganized and incomplete. There's no structured or formal transition from getting things installed and construction complete to when pre-commissioning is starting and commissioning, getting into some of the system processes as well. When that process is very disorganized, you're not setting commissioning up for success at all. You've likely had experiences on projects where commissioning is delayed due to constant snags. And it doesn't even have to be big things like equipment being late or procurement not arriving on site on time. It can be a whole bunch of small things. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts where you're missing a cable, you're missing a VFD setting, you've got a rolled wire, just lots of little things. Everything delays you, slows you down, that all the little things compound into big delays. Some of the other problems is, like the comments were saying earlier, commissioning is squeezed into half the time. I know 16-hour days are quite common to try and recovery, and this is a lot of projects' plans, right? Is just to try and push it on the commissioning guys and figure it out at the end, but that's not going to work. And you're really losing time during commissioning. You're missing your project in service date because you didn't have a plan to finish the project. There's a lot of mistakes that are made on projects as well that are symptoms of cowboy commissioning as well. One of the biggest ones is you're following outdated commissioning processes. Some of the processes or standards that you see out there, these were written 20, 30 years ago, like before the iPhone was even invented. So it's clear these processes don't work anyways, because 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. So if you're going back and you're defaulting to some of these old outdated processes, that's not what we need for projects today. It's not because you're missing technical commissioning, it's because you're not following the more advanced commissioning project management processes required for today's complex projects. You can go look into a lot of those old standards, but they no longer apply. Obviously, a lot has changed since they were written, right? Think about all the infrastructure interconnection that exists in the world, the technology that's evolved. There's just a lot of information that's generated on today's projects. And it makes no sense to learn and follow what's clearly not working. The way it's always been done on projects no longer works. Instead, we need to get away from these old, outdated industry norms and implement commissioning project management processes more suitable for today's projects. Standards such as CFOS with more sophisticated tools to manage commissioning must be implemented to generate the results we need on projects. And our Commissioning Academy training is based on these more modern systems and processes for commissioning project management. So Tim is saying scheduling outside vendors for startup often is compromised due to availability. Always a challenge for sure. When vendors are working on multiple projects, they're not just going to jump to the pump for your specific project, right? They've got other commitments, which makes it all the more important to be following commissioning project management so that when you plan and pick that date when the vendor is going to be on site, say 6 weeks in advance, you have certainty that that date is going to be met and they can show up on that date. Because 3 days before they're going to be on site, you don't have the option to say, oh, can you come the week later? Not going to happen. You need to be able to plan and organize commissioning in a much more sophisticated manner to know that you can hit your dates and that planned committed dates for vendors can show up and do their activities. So another mistake commonly made on projects is projects are being planned from left to right, where you plan some of the design, you get the construction completed, and then you figure out commissioning. That never works on projects. You need to start with the end in mind. The only way to hit your project in service date is to plan from right to left. There's your project in service date. What's required to meet that? Successful commissioning and startup. Awesome. Let's plan for successful commissioning and startup. What do we need for successful commissioning and startup? We need a lot of these construction items. Okay, let's work backwards there. What do we need for these construction items? We need a lot of the design activities. That is the only way to meet your project in service date, is to plan projects from right to left. And the only way to plan for your successful in service date is to begin with the end in mind and plan for successful commissioning and startup. Another mistake on projects is there's only a handful of people that understand what's actually required for commissioning. This is common, right? Commissioning is complex, and it's not reasonable to expect everyone to be a commissioning expert. However, it's also not helpful when only your commissioning experts know what's required for commissioning. And then when they get to site, it's all very common, right? As they complain, they're upset, nothing's ready, they don't have what they need. This is a common mistake on projects. Everyone needs clear instruction of what is required, even if they don't understand commissioning. And they don't need to be a commissioning expert, but they need to know what they need to do and when they need to do it, so that the commissioning experts have what they need to do their job when they get to site. And without some comprehensive method to track all the details, not everyone is aware of what's required for commissioning. It's not helpful having the details buried in an outdated spreadsheet. It's not helpful. We need to be using software as a communication tool to help everyone understand what is required for commissioning. Vendors' contracts relates to commissioning activities is a black box. I would say not even just vendors' contracts, but the whole commissioning process at the end of projects is often treated as a black box, right? I hear people say, well, The commissioning guys, they're wizards. They'll show up at the end and they'll figure all this out, but nobody understands what are the inputs to that black box, what's taking place in that black box, and what are the outputs at the end of that black box. It's just treated as this mysterious cloud that commissioning guys are going to work their magic and solve all the problems at the end. Not going to happen. The work packs are essential. Absolutely. Yep. The integration between the construction work packs and your static completion processes and how that aligns with what's required for pre-commissioning and commissioning is absolutely essential. And that's what I'm talking about when that construction completions process is not well defined, then work packs are missing. They don't align with what's required for pre-commissioning. Things are missing and your problems continue. Another common mistake on projects is you're using contracts to get the work started, but you're not using contracts as a tool to also finish the project. When you look in a lot of contracts, they're usually pretty light on commissioning details, right? Maybe you have some of the technical commissioning requirements in your contracts, but they're likely missing the commercial and project management requirements for commissioning. And this is what leads to a lot of confusion at the end of projects, because everyone spends most of their time arguing about how to finish the project during commissioning, stuck in meetings arguing about what's going to actually take place during commissioning, rather than following the process that should have already been defined in your contracts. I've seen this too many times, just meetings after meetings after meetings is what's required for commissioning, how are we going to do commissioning, and death by meetings, right? We need to have that defined all up front so it's crystal clear, everyone understands. Let's focus on execution rather than talk about what to do. So is this making sense? Does this sound like your projects? What has been your experience? Let me know in the comments. All right, so let's get into some good stuff here. There are 3 parts of project management. The first part is your planning frameworks required to plan your commissioning activities. Second aspect is your construction completion processes and the project management frameworks required for that. And then the third process in your project management framework for commissioning is your on-site commissioning and startup. These 3 processes make up the integrated completion framework. When integrated commissioning framework is established early in projects, your on-site commissioning becomes much easier. You're able to complete commissioning with ease. There's no delays. There's very few snags. There's always going to be a few small things, but nothing significant. They're significantly reduced. You have confidence that you can meet your deadlines on your projects. You save time and money on your projects by completing projects more efficiently. And most importantly, we're able to deliver quality systems that we can use for decades of reliable operation. However, when you're missing these commissioning project management frameworks, it may seem like you're making progress on your projects until commissioning starts, right? And then nothing works. Things are missing, constant delays. You're losing time during commissioning. You're scrambling to get things figured out. And you're panicking to try to keep your head above water as you've likely got executives breathing down your neck demanding results, right? What you end up with is cowboy commissioning. Without commissioning project management frameworks on projects, what do project teams try to do to fix this? Well, like we talked about earlier, dump everything on the commissioning guys to sort it out, right? Treat them as the wizards who try to make everything better at the end. 16-hour days are common, 7 days per week to try to recover. I guess the plan is just fingers crossed, hoping the project will end, right? And we know that hope is not a plan. The blame game starts, finger pointing of what went wrong, and you've likely got a pile of claims at the end of your project. And I guess the plan is to fight it out in court, right? But this is hardly a good approach to projects. There is a better way, and that is by implementing these commissioning frameworks early on your projects and establishing the defined processes to follow and the specific controls to monitor progress so that there's no surprises at the end of your project. You need easy to follow processes right from the beginning of projects that everyone understands, the project management controls to make informed decisions on your projects so that commissioning goes much smoother and there's no delays or snags. Is this sounding good? I see some comments. Yeah, spot on, late on time, often trying to schedule and fail. Absolutely, yep. As good practices in some companies is to assign maintenance operation personnel to be part of the CSU team. I would not only say that that's good practice, but I would say that that's essential. When we get into some of the pre-commissioning and commissioning activities, there's no better way for the operating team that's going to be responsible for operation and maintenance once the project is complete to see the systems. The experts are all on site, talk to them, see the troubleshooting, ask all the questions, and get that level of comfort and experience with these systems so that we don't drop this all on them at the end of the project. I would say that's absolutely essential. It supports that soft transition from the project, the capital world, to the operations and maintenance world, right? Is having those operating teams involved earlier gets them that level of comfort when the systems go in service. Of course, there's other aspects of training and documentation and all those aspects for operational readiness. Those are all important, but nothing beats the boots on the ground, hands-on, working with the equipment to support that soft transition from one group to the other. So absolutely essential to be part of your project management planning processes. Okay, these are the details of what's included in each framework. But first, why is it called the Integrated Commissioning Framework? Well, that's because commissioning of projects and your commissioning project management frameworks must be integrated into all earlier stages of projects. We must have commissioning part of procurement, part of our design processes, part of our construction processes, part of our construction completion processes, and we'll go through each one of those here shortly. Remember, we need one commissioning process to follow through all stages of projects, one commissioning team, one commissioning process, regardless of which group you're part of. It's the only way this all comes together at the end of your project. So let's go through each framework. The first one being planning, and there's 10 project management frameworks that are required as part of the planning framework. The first aspect is contracts. Contracts define the rules of the game, right? So if the rules of how the project is going to be finished during commissioning are missed in contracts, then your project's already set up for failure right from the beginning. When it comes to your engineering contracts, your construction contracts, even your equipment procurement contracts, all of these need to be defined with the end in mind, to have the critical aspects of what are required from an engineering perspective, from a construction perspective, from a sequence of subsystem handovers, and how this is defined for construction completions. All of your equipment procurement contracts, or at least a specification if others are procuring your equipment, how does this need to be defined so that the right aspects are being tested in the factory when it comes to factory acceptance testing, and more particularly integrated factory acceptance testing? What's defined in contracts so we're setting things up for success at the end. The next aspect is your feed processes. So during design, there's critical input that's required from commissioning, from operations during preliminary design reviews, detailed design reviews. We need to be making sure that this feedback from the end of project is flowing back to the beginning of project. And this is really where your lessons learned come into play on projects. I'm sure you've been part of projects where there's lessons learned that are gathered, but they're very quickly put on the shelf and forgotten about. And the next project is started with all the same problems, right? Projects are typically pretty bad at incorporating lessons learned, but this is how this happens, is to get the experience from the end of the project involved during your feed processes, during preliminary design, during detailed design, and even during some very specific design packages, say your control systems where you're preparing process control narratives. You want to have the right commissioning input, the right operational input to make sure that your control narratives are being designed correctly, are being understood, and that by the groups that are implementing them are interpreting those specifications correctly so that we can get systems we can actually work with and use during commissioning and operations. The third aspect is your factory acceptance testing and IFAT planning. So a lot of the typical factory acceptance testing, we've been doing that for decades, and you would be very familiar with that. If you need to test a pump in the factory and run it for a few hours and measure 3 points on the pump curve, that's pretty well understood and defined. Typically not a whole lot of problems there. But when it gets to some of the more complex systems, say your control and protection systems and your control cubicles, we need to be taking a more sophisticated approach to test these items in the factory. And that's why we have integrated factory acceptance testing. Testing only the hardware of your control and protection cubicles is completely ineffective. We need to be implementing integrated testing of both the hardware and the software in the factory to make sure that these systems function correctly. I've got a good case study coming up here. I'll show you two projects of taking different approach in that manner in integrated factory acceptance testing and how that turned out for those two projects. But these are the things we need to be implementing on our projects to de-risk our project and know that when these complicated systems are arriving on site, we have confidence that they're going to function. If all of that integration is left to be done on site later, then all that time and effort that should have been done debugging and proving interfaces is going to eat into your commissioning time, right? People will call that commissioning, but it's not. It's development and debugging that needs to be taking place earlier to de-risk our commissioning processes. So the next aspect is project systematization. And this is one of the main reasons, again, to have the commissioning guys involved earlier in projects is we need to be taking a subsystems-based approach through all stages of projects. Your project systematization is what defines those subsystems. So at a certain point during the design, when the equipment tag list is defined, we need to be allocating each of those tags into the various subsystems and then having that flow through all stages of the project from a design perspective, from a construction perspective, defined in contracts, of course, so that all these activities identically align with our commissioning and our project startup process. If you've got activities that are being worked on in the wrong sequence through design and construction that don't align identically with the project startup sequence, you're already not setting the project up for success. So by having project systematization involved early in the project, we can define those subsystems. We can guide that process in our commissioning management software through all stages of the project so that everything aligns at the end when it needs to come together for our commissioning and startup processes. Our gated commissioning workflows, of course, we need to be planning and preparing. What's our sequence of activities we're going to be following? Do we have discipline completions? Do we have subsystem completions? What are the forms and certificates we're going to be used to manage each of the subsystems through our gated commissioning workflows, and how this is defined within our commissioning management software? And then, of course, preparing and setting up our commissioning software is an important aspect. Once we've got a lot of these items developed, when we've defined our project systematization, then how is this being modeled in our software? How are our gated commissioning workflows being managed and tracked within our software? What software system are we going to use? How are all groups on the project expected to interface and use our commissioning software? Are we having vendors involved in the software, or is it only one individual representative from each group? What's the expectation to use these systems? If you try and figure that out and define it all at the end of your project, good luck trying to get people to use these systems that were never defined properly in contracts. Of course, that can be done, but there's always a fee for that, right? So then, once we've progressed through a lot of our planning efforts here, how are we sequencing our commissioning and how are we preparing this into our overall commissioning schedule? What is the sequence of activities? How is this being scheduled with durations and dates? And then more importantly, how is this being modeled in our commissioning software so that we can track all these activities and know what needs to be completed and when? Another aspect is, I briefly mentioned it, the forms and certificates. So during our gated commissioning workflows, there's sign-offs that are required. There's milestones to be achieved. So what forms are being used for this? How are these certificates being used? Who has sign-off authority of each of these forms and certificates? And when I say forms and certificates, I don't mean the paper that maybe we've been used to. Is what are the forms in our commissioning software that are being used? How are the certificates being identified as milestones within our commissioning software? And who's responsible to sign off on these to make sure that subsystems are progressing through our gated commissioning workflows properly so that nothing gets missed? Another item, we'd all be very familiar with our checklists and procedures. We need to be preparing all of our checklist documentation, all the procedures required for commissioning or verification of our process control narratives. We need to have all this documentation prepared in advance because during commissioning, there's no time to plan any of these activities. We need the documentation created. We need it on the shelf, ready to go, so that when we hit our on-site commissioning, we can focus strictly on execution. And a lot of these checklists and procedures, they're much easier to create now because the software has all these functions in them. You need a checklist to go through a ultrasonic level transmitter. Well, there's a form and a template that exists for that already in your commissioning software. You pull up that, you maybe change a few parameters, something that doesn't apply to your project, a couple other parameters, done, move on. So the systems that are out there significantly help us prepare for some of these items here. So the last item, not because it's the least important, it's actually the most important, is safety. There's no point in going through any of these planning efforts or on-site commissioning activities if we can't do it safely. And the commissioning team is relied on heavily to make sure that our startup processes take place safely. They're on the commissioning team is a lot of the equipment experts that have done this before and are familiar with some of the hazards to be aware of. So we need to be planning our safety processes in advance of on-site commissioning and what's required for our PSSR processes, what test readiness reviews are going to be conducted, how are we working with our HSE teams to make sure that everything we do here is safe so that everyone can celebrate the success of the project at the end. So those are the planning frameworks that are required for our commissioning project management structure. Here, we can move on to our construction completion frameworks, and there's two frameworks that are required here. You're likely familiar with some of the punch list walk down processes that are required, but we need to define this in a formal way in how are these punch list walk downs taking place? How are punch items being identified? How are these being tracked within our commissioning management software? How are they categorized and how are they linked within our commissioning management software with our sequence and schedule to know our A punch, B punch, C punch, when do these need to be completed? And this is critical to identify that time component of when these need to be completed, right? We can identify a whole host of issues, but if everyone else on the project team doesn't know when they need to be addressed, then they just pile up, right? And that's what causes delays. So the project management frameworks to formalize this punch list walk down process and categorization is critical to define in advance. The second aspect of construction completions is to define your subsystem static completion. It's very typical on projects. Everyone's definition of done means something different, right? Everyone's the commissioning guy's definition of done means something different than the construction guy's definition of done, means something different than the design guy's definition of done. And when nobody can even agree on what done means, then how does everybody know what to do to meet some of these milestones? Well, when we put in the upfront effort and we define very crystal clear what does each subsystem static completion mean? What is that very defined and specific goalpost for each subsystem? Then there's no guessing. Everyone has a crystal clear picture of what that goalpost is and what they need to do to meet it. That's the only way to have a structured handover of your project subsystems from construction to commissioning is by putting in this upfront effort based on your project systematization of what each static completion actually represents and means, not only from a physical equipment perspective, but also from a documentation or other design deliverables perspective. It doesn't help if we get all the VFDs installed, but the design team didn't realize or missed that we also need the protection coordination study to define what all those VFD settings are. We need to define everything so that everyone knows what's required, when it's required, no surprises. Lane asks, in your flow sheet, I'm assuming that mechanical completion is included under the construction completions. Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes the term is mechanical completion or static completion. Unfortunately, there's no agreed or accepted term in a lot of these commissioning processes, even from project to project in the same industry. It all depends on what's defined in their contract, if it's defined as mechanical completion or static completion. I find even that some people get confused by mechanical completion. The electrical guys will say, that doesn't apply to me, I'm the electrical guy. Yeah, mechanical completion represents exactly what you're referring to it as, is like static completion. It's installed and ready for further testing of pre-commissioning and commissioning. So it's part of that construction completions process, and is why it needs to be defined, because sometimes the terminology can even confuse people, right? I see in some of the stuff I post online, and I mentioned mechanical completion, and people are asking me, well, what about the electrical stuff? Well, it's an unfortunate term, but it means that it's installed, right? So maybe static completion is a better word. Wouldn't it be awesome if across all industries we could agree on this commissioning terminology? Maybe we'll get there someday, right? So then the next framework here is our on-site commissioning and startup frameworks, and there's 3 aspects involved here. So our pre-commissioning, commissioning, and startup processes, what's taking place during each of these gated workflows as subsystems progress through these workflows, our performance verification, trial operation, and handover. How are our subsystems progressing through each of these? So when you put in the upfront effort, everything that we've talked about for the planning elements of commissioning, these last 6 frameworks actually become much easier. It's easy to follow the processes that were set up, the frameworks that were in place, and the workflows as defined in our commissioning management software to know where all parts of the project are in this workflow. Nothing gets missed, everything's tracked, because it's a busy time on projects, right? There's lots of things going on, and subsystems are all in various stages of completion and commissioning, and where they are through these workflows all needs to be tracked and managed so that nothing gets missed. All right, let's take a deep breath. That was a lot to go through there, and a lot to take in. We went through it fairly quickly, but let me check in. How's everybody doing in the chat? Is this all making sense? Is there any questions? Is some of this familiar? Is some of this new? Have you done this on projects? Yeah, you're right. A dictionary of terminology I helped develop. However, nothing is standardized. Even within the same industry, the power industry, one project will use something different than the next power project will use something different. Nothing is standardized. It's unfortunate. I've got a terminology dictionary that I've compiled as well. What's missing is that overall fundamental governing body for process commissioning and energy commissioning, right? There's pieces of that that exist for building commissioning, but there's no governing body for process commissioning and energy commissioning. We are working on that a little bit with the Commissioning Professional Society to maybe get to that level where we could have an overarching governing body, but it doesn't exist right now. It's a gap in the industry for sure. It's one of the reasons I put this program together, is because there's just a huge gap and a lack of information, a lack of understanding of what this process commissioning process or energy commissioning process is, to help fill in some of that gap. All right, so the framework I've just described is the only proven way to complete capital projects. This is the only framework that will allow you to meet your project and service date. Project teams, of course, will try a lot of different things on projects, right? Like Roger was mentioning earlier, but none of them work, which is why 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. What I've described is the only proven and reliable way to methodically complete projects, period. For all types of projects, for all industries, this is the proven method to complete projects. If you're not doing this on your projects, this is one of the main reasons your projects are late. Lance asks, how can you measure your milestones during commissioning? That's all measured in our commissioning management software. When we're tracking this and using our commissioning management software, we have the data that's available, and this is all tracked. You can track anything you want, as big or as small as you want, as much effort as you want to put into the software. And that's why this planning element is important, because if you don't set your software up correctly, it's garbage in, garbage out. But when it's done properly, you can measure the completion of any milestone you want, and you can know exactly where it's at. You can know exactly what's holding it up. You can know exactly who you need to talk to progress that item when you get to that level of sophistication and use these tools properly. Now, not all tools are the best at doing that. There's some that are better than others, but the really sophisticated programs that you want to be using on your process systems or your energy systems, you can get that level of detail on your projects. Some people ask me, well, what about Scrum, or what about Agile, or what about AWP? While these tactics are helpful for design and construction, and you should certainly use them for aspects of the projects where they apply, they're not really for commissioning. Commissioning requires a different thought process. Commissioning requires a systems-based approach to this work. And I think this is why there is a lot of confusion in the industry on what commissioning is really all about. The systems-based approach that is on the screen is the only proven process to methodically complete capital projects. So don't get distracted by some of that other project management jargon. It's not actually what you need to complete projects. Focus on the fundamentals with the systems-based approach that we are discussing today. What is the right time to align commissioning execution and contract construction execution plan? That's got to be done during your design processes. Once you have a tag list and you can systematize your project, that needs to align through all stages of the project. If you're doing that only a few months before construction or even after your construction contract is awarded, good luck trying to award that. You can have some of those discussions with the groups involved on the project, and they'll certainly tell you, yeah, we can align some of these activities. There's always a cost and it'll be expensive. So that's why you need to have this stuff planned earlier and have the commissioning team involved earlier, so you can plan some of these alignments right from the beginning, because if you don't, it's a shit show at the end of your project. The systems-based approach is the only way. Yep, you got it. So lots of good comments in the chat. I love it. It's making sense to a lot of people. How about others that maybe aren't as familiar with this? Have you seen some of this on your projects? Is some of this familiar, or is maybe this approach sounding too good to be true? Is how could you actually do this on projects? Is this just pie in the sky stuff? Well, it's not. This is real. This is how projects need to be completed. I've done it. I can tell by some of Lane's comments that he's done it too, as a systems-based approach is the only way to execute projects. So for some context, let's look at a possible timeline. The bulk of the effort in your commissioning project management frameworks is during your commissioning planning processes. So let's say you have 6 months of commissioning at the end of your project. That maybe means that you have 18 months of effort prior to that to plan what is required for commissioning. It could be more than that. It's got to align with some of your feed processes. So maybe you've got 2 years ahead of, or maybe even more. Just a rough outline. Maybe you've got a slightly smaller project where you've got 2 months of commissioning or 1 month of commissioning at the end of your project. So maybe you've got 10 months of effort required in advance to plan for your commissioning, or 8 months. But the point is there that there's a lot of work that's required ahead of commissioning, ahead of your on-site commissioning, to make sure it goes well. When commissioning project management frameworks are established early in projects, completing construction and commissioning is so much easier later in the projects. I'm sure you've heard of the 80-20 rule. When it comes to managing commissioning, 80% of the work is required and done during the planning stage. And this is unfortunately what's missing on most projects, isn't it? But when the first 80% is wrong, or if it's not done at all, the last 28% of your project will be a nightmare, guaranteed. Cowboy commissioning is what you've signed up for. Commissioning is just too fast-paced. There's too much information, and you can't possibly keep your head above water if you want to try and do that 80% of the work or skip it altogether during your on-site commissioning. It's just not how you're going to complete your projects. So let's look at a case study. So these are two fairly big projects, but don't let that discourage you. If you're working on a smaller project, say that's a $5 million project, if you're working on a $5 billion project, big or small, these lessons all apply to all sizes of projects. So I was the commissioning manager on this first project. The first project we've got here is Bipole 3. It's a 2,300 megawatt HVDC link we built in central Canada here. Project took place between 2015 and 2018, so I'm very familiar with this project being the commissioning manager. At the same time, there was a project on eastern coast of Canada called the Labrador Island Link. It was completed between 2012 and 2023. Now, there was lots of things wrong with this project. It actually resulted in a public inquiry in 2020. And you can read all about the public inquiry if you want. It's at muskratfallsinquiry.ca. But there's one aspect I want to highlight between these two projects is the approach to integrated factory acceptance testing, the software development testing that was done in the factory. So this is a headline from Labrador Island Link or Muskrat Falls project from last year in March 2020. And what the headline says, as software struggles persist, consultant says Muskrat Falls completion is impossible to predict. So you can see that they're having troubles with the software as of last year. June 2022, last year, software troubles blamed for $260 million Muskrat Falls cost increase. And then still even earlier this year, March 2023, still having trouble with full power transfers, where the Newfoundland Hydro president is optimistic about Muskrat Falls, despite discovery of new problems. The issue being they couldn't transfer at full megawatt capacity. So certainly not good headlines, even this late in the project, that they're dealing with some of the software issues that exist. And HVDC control and stability software elements are complex. They do require some upfront valuation to make sure that this stuff is going to work. So you can see even earlier this year, they're still doing software development, and we can only assume that testing in the factory of these protection cubicles was only done on the hardware. There was no software element of integrated factory acceptance testing. Otherwise, if it had been, we wouldn't be seeing these headlines or these issues that exist on the project this late in the project. The approach we took on Bipole 3 was much different. We took 6 months of integrated factory acceptance testing, where there was 30 cubicles that were required for the southern terminal and 30 cubicles that were required for the northern terminal. We had all 60 of these cubicles wired up, integrated together, and powered up with a full HMI environment, and we could simulate the entire 23 megawatt transfers in the factory. And we spent all of those 6 months poring over all the details of every squiggly line to make sure that this software was going to function correctly. This was all done 18 months in advance of our project in service date. There was, of course, lots of pressure to release the cubicles. The construction teams needed these to install them on site, but we made sure it was complete. We put in the effort of our 6 months integrated factory acceptance testing to make sure that we did this proactive offsite testing to know that when these cubicles arrived at site, both the hardware and the software were functioning as we needed them to be. So 18 months in advance, we were able to determine our project in service date of July 1st, 2018, and we were able to meet that date. One of the main contributing factors was because of this proactive process to test both integrated hardware and software in the factory before releasing those cubicles. You can see on Muskrat Falls project, they didn't do that, and it's pretty costly to try and figure that out that late stage in the project. So contrasting these two projects, this is one of the major lessons I took away, is that IFAT is essential. You cannot integrate your software for the first time on site. You maybe could get away with that 20 years ago, but projects are complex, and the level of sophisticated controls that exist on projects require a more proactive approach to make sure that these systems are going to work. Even on Bipole 3, some of the smaller elements of the project that chose to do their software integration on site for the first time, they ran into lots of problems. Damaged hardware, years of delays, expensive fixes, because the software just would not and could not function as it needed to do, and caused damage during unplanned events. So that's a lesson learned I took away. I passed that lesson on to you, is this is what we need to be doing on projects, is taking these more sophisticated approaches to develop hardware and software in the factory before we get to site. Okay, another deep breath. We've covered a lot of good information today. Let me know in the chat if this is making sense, and if you're ready to follow this commissioning project management processes on your projects. Let me know that you'll begin your projects with the end in mind. You'll prevent commissioning from being a sub-activity to an individual group, that you'll have everyone involved, and that you'll please stop using paper and spreadsheets on your projects. Can you please promise me this? To correct these 3 mistakes, we've discussed how commissioning can be simplified into a 3-part project management framework. The commissioning frameworks required to plan your projects, construction completion processes that are required for an orderly transition from construction to commissioning, as well as the project management frameworks required for on-site commissioning and startup. Does this seem doable on your projects? Can you please go implement this on your projects? And if you're ready, what's the first step you're going to take next week, say on Monday, to start implementing this right away on your projects? What I've given you today are the project management systems and controls that successful project teams use to complete commissioning and meet deadlines. What I've given you are the commissioning project management frameworks required if you will want to avoid making costly mistakes on your projects, you want to avoid cowboy commissioning and the scramble at the end of projects, avoid following outdated commissioning processes from 20, 30 years ago that no longer work, and to avoid the consequences of a failed project. Think of the Muskrat Falls project. We definitely don't want headlines like that on our projects. Of course, we all want this. I'm sure you want to get it right the first time. You want confidence with commissioning rather than gambling. You want to skip the 10-year learning curve and get your project started the right way. And you want to be able to work on the biggest and best projects. So the way I see it, you have two choices. You can spend the next 10 years trying to figure this stuff out on your own, and that is a totally legitimate way to go. That's what I did. Is I worked on several projects over the last decade or two, figuring this stuff out to figure out what's required to plan and execute commissioning. You can continue with cowboy commissioning on your projects if you don't want to implement this stuff. You can roll the dice and you can see how your projects turn out at the end. You can learn the commissioning project management process by trial and error. Like I said, this is what I had to do over the last 10 years, and you can certainly do the same. If you also want to instead get a project management approach to commissioning right now, and you want to get the project management systems and controls you need to successfully lead or manage commissioning, you want to skip the 10-year learning curve that I had to go through, and you want to set your projects and your career up for success right now, then this is option number 2 that I want to show you. If option number 2 sounds like a better approach to understand how this process works before starting your next project, to get all the systems and controls in place for commissioning, to get all the templates, procedures, form certificates, everything you need to start with a subsystems approach on your project through all phases, to get all the commissioning workflows you need, all the planning details that are required, the software you need, how to set it up and how to use it. You want to cut the learning curve down instead of having to go through many painful years. I can give you all this stuff in just a few weeks. If you want everything you need for commissioning project management in one package, and if you want this all right now, then I want to introduce you to our Commissioning Academy Integrated Completions Program. This is literally the most comprehensive program for commissioning project management ever created. I've looked everywhere. I've looked through all the other documentation that exists out there, and I haven't been able to find it. Maybe internally inside some company, there's a method to explain this to people, but it's not available to the public because it doesn't exist. I've never been able to find it. This is literally what you need to close the gap that exists on projects. Remember the gap we identified in the project org chart at the beginning of this presentation? This program fills that gap and is the fastest method to get up to speed of what's required for commissioning project management. These are the processes that people and projects need to be successful with commissioning project management. This is the missing piece on a lot of projects. The project management systems and controls to make sure commissioning is successful. It's actually really painful to watch people struggle on projects without this stuff because we know the solution. The answers are all right here. But without this, people continue to struggle on projects until they learn over 10 years how to do this stuff. It drives me nuts. People don't need to struggle on projects. They need these commissioning project management processes to guide them to success. And this is the reason I created this Commissioning Academy program, is to close this gap on projects and stop people from struggling to complete their projects. Alvaro, yep, this is the right way, absolutely. So our program that we've got, our Commissioning Academy program, this is perfect for people at all levels. If you're a beginner, you get everything you need so you won't have to make any mistakes on your projects. So for example, if you're a project manager and you need to understand how to finish your projects, and really you should know how to finish your projects because that's a project manager's fundamental goal, right? Is to finish on time and on budget. Project managers need to know this stuff. Or If you have a strong technical background and you want to move up in projects, then this program is your best option. You get a massive head start when you understand these methods before starting projects. If you're intermediate, you have some commissioning experience, well, this is your opportunity to fix your cowboy commissioning. Your projects are probably late and over budget, because 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. Well, this is your opportunity to fix your cowboy commissioning and improve those odds of project outcomes. If you're an expert, you can get a project management approach to commissioning to save time and money on your project, right? Companies are always striving for process improvements and more efficiency. This is your opportunity to fine-tune your processes to make commissioning even easier. Our program shows you how to do this, and it's super simple to get started. You can go to learncsu.com, enter your info, and I'll text you back right away. We can have a quick chat and see on what's the best option for you, and we can get you into the program right away. Now, enter your name, email, and phone number. If for whatever reason your phone number is not being recognized, there's a link right at the bottom there where you can just skip the phone number part. If you've got an overseas phone number, no problem. Click that link, you can fill it out and submit there as well. So there are two ways that we help you and your projects. We have our Commissioning Academy training program, and this is our signature program to show people how to do all this stuff. This walks you through exactly how to apply these commissioning project management principles on your projects. And this is a good option for individuals that need to figure this stuff out for their next projects. We also offer consulting services for organizations that need maybe a bit more guided support to implement this on their projects. You get access to all of our course content, plus I work directly with you and your project team to get this implemented within your project delivery processes. I provide guided support to implement this on your projects fast, and this is a good solution for organizations that must improve their project delivery processes for better commissioning. Both options, you get the information you need for project commissioning management, and since 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget, this is how we help you and your project team improve these odds of completing projects. So in addition to everything we've discussed, both options also include access to our 3 mechanical, electrical, and automation pre-commissioning and commissioning modules. What we found is people have some really good technical backgrounds, some technical experience, and maybe it's very focused on one discipline. They've got some very good mechanical expertise, but they're maybe not quite as familiar with the electrical or the automation components, or they've got a strong electrical background, maybe not as familiar with some of the other components there. So we've got 3 modules here that go through the typical pre-commissioning and commissioning aspects that you would find on projects, because we need to understand all the systems on projects and how they all integrate together. So these have been super helpful for people that have gone through our program. We have our checklist and procedure database. I think there's over 180 templates of checklists and procedures that exist here. These are sometimes super helpful if you don't have a software system that has all of this built into it. You can start with some of these templates and procedures, modify a few things, and create the documentation you need for your projects. There's several case studies within the programs where you can see how some of this applies on various types of systems. You get access to our forms and certificates library. So for example, one of the first things you need to create is a commissioning kickoff meeting agenda. They're all very similar in the things that you need to talk about during a commissioning meeting agenda. You go into our forms and certificates library, you pulled out that agenda, you maybe delete a few things, add a few other things, send that out to your meeting attendees, done, on to your next task. Super helpful, super fast. You get access to our private members LinkedIn group, where once you're in there, you can talk to some of the other people that are going through our program, collaborate, bounce ideas off each other on what you're finding in the course program. It's also sometimes super helpful. You might find somebody on the other side of the world that's working on a project very similar to yours. You can bounce ideas off on some of the challenges they're encountering or some of the specific approaches they're taking to their projects. Super helpful. Sometimes we're kind of isolated at the end of project working on commissioning. It's good to have some colleagues to be able to bounce some other ideas off of. We are accredited by EIC, so what that allows us to do is when you complete the program and pass the exam, we're able to issue an accredited certificate along with the associated accredited CEU and PDH credits for the program that you can use for your professional PDH hours, or recognition that you've completed the program. Everything's logged and registered at eicregistry.com, so you can point people there and say, I've completed this program. This is what I've learned. And it's sometimes a super helpful thing to post on LinkedIn. I've seen people complete our program and they post that on LinkedIn, and then they get some people contacting them, say, what do you know about commissioning? Can you help us out here? Good program for sure. You also get lifetime access. So you get access to all this material for your current project. If you've got another project, say 2-3 years from now, you still have access. You can draw on all the forums, libraries, certificates, everything you need, processes to follow. It's all there. No restrictions on how long you have access to the program. So this is literally everything you need to successfully complete your projects during commissioning. And you can go to learncsu.com to get started right away. Remember, you can also download the CMS software list at this link, enter your info, and I'll text you back right away. We can have a brief chat, answer a few questions, and we can see what's the best option for you to proceed. If you prefer, there's also a link there where you can book a Zoom call. We can have a one-on-one discussion, and I can chat further about the course if you have any questions. So definitely get your information entered in there right away. So from some of the comments, it does sound like people are doing this on their projects and they do have this all figured out. And this is, if this is exactly what you're doing on projects, then that is actually fantastic. You're on the right track, and please keep up the good work. You're part of the project leadership that we need to help our projects succeed. We do need better project performance, and you're one of the people that's going to make that happen. So thank you a bunch for taking interest in understanding this process and driving forward to implement this on your projects. However, I know that most project teams have not figured this stuff out because the data tells us this, right? 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. So this tells me that most projects don't have this stuff figured out and are still using outdated commissioning processes or no commissioning processes at all. So if this stuff is all new to you, or if you've been part of a project that's struggled with commissioning in the past, or if you've been on this presentation multiple times, you've read through our emails, you've maybe taken the mini course that we have there and you need more, it means that you're still trying to figure out commissioning. It means you haven't been able to figure this stuff out on your own. And it means it's risky to your career and your projects to continue to try to figure this stuff out on your own. It's time to get support because this stuff is complex and it takes a long time to learn. It took me 10 years to learn, right? Now, the support you need doesn't need to come from me. You can get support from someone else to help figure this stuff out, but you do need someone to show you how to do this because this is specialized project management. And if this is something you want to do, then you need a faster way than trying to learn this stuff on your own, because that's really the only other option other than following the outdated commissioning standards that exist, right? Now, I do think it's possible for people to figure this out on their own. I certainly did. It took me 10 years of working on several projects to figure this stuff out on my own and get good at it. It's just that there's too long of a learning cycle to figure this stuff out on your own. When a project takes 2 or 3 or 4 years to complete, it can take that long to see if what you did 2 years prior was actually the right thing to do to make commissioning successful. And with a 2 to 3 year learning cycle, it can take several of these cycles to get this stuff all figured out. 10 years is not uncommon to become good at this stuff. It's just not an efficient way to learn. The lessons are hard and slow to learn on your own that cost you and your projects significant time and effort to figure out, let alone the damage to your career when you don't get this right. A better way to learn this stuff is right here. And that's why I created this program, to bridge the gap that exists on projects and to break the industry norms of outdated commissioning processes so you can get everything you need with just the click of a button. Please don't waste the next 10 years trying to figure all this stuff out and make costly mistakes along the way, costly impacts to your projects, costly impacts to your career. The Muskrat Falls project is not a project, the headlines that I want to have on my resume doesn't look very good when you're looking for your next project and they see some of that history that exists there. You can get everything you need right here, right now. Please be careful. Projects are brutal out there. And I want you to be successful with this stuff. It's cutthroat out there. The construction industry is a $14 trillion worldwide industry with everyone trying to get their piece of the pie, right? There's people out there that do this stuff all the time, and they know how to exploit the system. So I don't want you to get taken advantage of if you don't get this stuff right on your projects. The help you need is right here, so you can make sure your projects are successful. So for those of you that are ready to get a massive head start with commissioning project management, go to learncsu.com, enter your information. I'll text you back right away, answer a few questions, and we can get you started on the right path. I'm looking forward to chatting with you and helping you and your projects succeed with commissioning. Okay, cool. How's everybody doing? Lane is saying, thank you. You are very impressive and know your stuff. Great presentation. Appreciate it, Lane. I like the feedback. If there's any other questions, shoot them into the chat. We can go through some Q&A here and answer any other questions that you have. While you get your questions entered, there's a few here that I can go through of some of the typical questions that I get at this point in the presentation. The first question I get, of course, is, well, what are the costs of our Commissioning Academy program? And when it comes to commissioning, there is really no one-size solution that fits all, right? So when you enter your information at learncsu.com, we can briefly have a quick chat by text. I'll answer any questions that you have, and we can find the best solution for you and your projects. And we can easily find a payment option that works for you. Now, what a lot of people do is get their company to pay, right? Because companies love to pay for this training. When you know how to properly plan and execute commissioning on projects, you can easily save projects a month or more of schedule. And what's a month of schedule worth on your projects? Well, on the low end, maybe it's $100,000, but it's more likely $10 or $20 million per month, the cost of 1 month on your project, right? And when you can save projects this kind of money, your company's happy to pay. Projects are crazy expensive, and 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budgets. Companies, of course, want to avoid this, right? And when you know how to properly plan and execute commissioning, you can save a lot of time at the end of your projects during commissioning, and that saves your company a lot of money. That's why companies are excited to get you into our training, because they get significant value from it. So go to learncsu.com, submit your information, and we'll get you the paperwork you need to submit for your HR training approvals. Super simple. Now, some people still choose to invest on their own, and that's a good choice too. They invest in training because they know how valuable they become to companies when they understand this stuff. Valuable to their current company and valuable to other companies that are working on projects. And when you can save projects millions of dollars with commissioning project management, you're in demand. You can literally pick your project and name your price. There is such a huge labor shortage on projects, as I'm sure you're aware, for both technical roles and for leadership roles, and projects are scrambling to try to fill these roles with people that understand this stuff. Remember the org chart that we looked at the beginning of this presentation with the gap we identified with project managers and technical commissioning? This gap in commissioning project management is real. It exists on most projects. And when you understand this stuff, companies are begging for people that can fill these roles. These are high-paying leadership roles that can literally make huge impacts on your projects. But very few people actually understand commissioning project management. And when you understand this stuff, you're extremely in demand because you can deliver results. And that's why people invest on their own in our Commissioning Academy program, to open up these career opportunities so they can work on new and exciting projects. So go to learncsu.com, enter your information, and we'll discuss what is the best option for you. Another question I sometimes get is, maybe you're still not convinced that systems and controls for commissioning can actually help you in your projects. From some of the comments in the chat, I'm not seeing that people are very much agreeing that this is what's required, but maybe there's still some hesitation that, how is this going to help my project? It seems like an expense, right? I have to hire some additional people, I have to pay for some software. I'm not going to incur that expense. I don't need this stuff. Well, one thing I can guarantee is that without this, it's a gamble. You're rolling the dice on your projects. Your project may be successful, but the data shows that it probably won't be. And that's not good for you, your projects, or your company. However, when you implement these systems and controls for commissioning, you're much more likely to achieve your project objectives. You actually have the ability to control your project outcome during commissioning. You reduce the risk of your projects being late and over budget. It's just good risk mitigation for both you and your project. Sometimes people hear people say, well, I don't need this. We have consultants looking at commissioning. They'll fix everything. And while I'm sure you do have very smart consultants involved in your projects, and they are probably excellent at providing the technical aspects of commissioning, I can almost assure you that you're not getting the commercial and project management aspects of commissioning that you need. It's not their role. They understand technical commissioning, not commissioning project management. So if that's the case, let's have a quick chat. We can explore if there's any gaps in what you think you're getting from your consultant. Reach out to me at learncsu.com and we can have a quick discussion. Sometimes people ask me, well, why do I need this commissioning project management? I'll just go get my PMP and I'll use that instead to manage my projects. And this is what most project managers will do, right? But when you look at PMI's information, it's pretty light on details for how to finish a project. Everything you'll see in PMI covers how to start a project. The stuff I help people with isn't included in PMP. This is the missing part of what's required to actually finish capital projects. You actually need the full picture on how to start projects and how to finish projects. So what I've actually done is I've included 5 PMP practice exams in our program. So this gives you a head start on some of the upfront PMI information. And you can use these PMP practice exams if maybe someday you want to write the PMP exam. There's 5 practice exams that you can go in there and complete as well. So you can see what's required to start projects and you can get all our information that you actually need to finish projects. Maybe this all sounds good to you, but you're not sure that your organization can actually make this transition and improve their project delivery processes. I get comments from people afterwards saying, yeah, this is all a good goal to strive towards, but there's too much bureaucracy in my organization and they have no thought that they can actually get this done. And I get it. Organizational change is difficult, right? How do you get others on board? But if you don't get this done on projects, then what's the alternative? The alternative is another failed project, right? Is that a good plan? No. Instead, you need to rip the Band-Aid and plan for success rather than accepting another failure as the only option. That's why I created this program for you to make this easier for you and your project team. I'm here to help you and your projects improve and grow so that we can have better project outcomes. I'm here to help you get this implemented on your projects, and I want you to get this right on your projects rather than being stuck in the endless meetings trying to figure this out at the 11th hour with everyone else at the end of your project. Another question I get is, I hear people say, this doesn't apply to our projects. You know what? We do commissioning differently. We're in a different industry. This doesn't apply. And to that, I say, of course you do commissioning differently. All projects do commissioning differently. Every project has a unique set of circumstances, right? The breakers to close, the valves to open, they're always project specific. The technical commissioning aspects are always different. There's no 2 projects the same. Even the same similar projects within the same industry, they're of course going to be different. However, the systems and controls for commissioning are always the same, regardless of the technical details. And this is what's missing on projects. The same steps need to be taken for everything we've discussed today on all projects. It's always the same risk-based approach to manage commissioning so that your project-specific testing goes well. Last question I often get is, I want to learn this stuff to understand commissioning project management, but I don't have time right now. I'll maybe look at it next year. And I'll tell you, when you're working on projects, there is never a good time, right? You're always busy on projects. Life is busy. Even when you think you'll have time later, that never happens. There's never a break between projects, right? At the end of projects, if you're one of the good guys always get scooped up for the next projects. And that's why we designed our program to be part-time. You can complete it in just a few weeks with only a few hours, evenings and weekends, as required to work around your busy schedule. There is no better time to get this stuff figured out. If you think there's a better time later, it never happens. I've seen people always say, oh, later. 2 years later, they're still struggling with this stuff. If you don't do it now, you never will. And you and your projects will always struggle with commissioning, just like 9 out of 10 projects do. Complete this training now when you're busy. That way it will be much easier when you have more time later. All right, those are a lot of the typical questions I get. Hopefully I answered your questions. If you have anything more, shoot them into the chat. If there's any other barriers you think you see on taking the next steps to get this stuff figured out on your projects, let me know. If you think you can get this done in your projects, let me know that as well. If you do need any more help to get this stuff figured out, then by all means, reach out to us at learncsu.com. We can have a quick chat. I'll answer any questions that you have, and we can see if our program is a good fit for you and get you enrolled. I'm here to help you lead and manage commissioning of your projects to benefit you in your career, to benefit your projects, to benefit the global challenges that we all face together on completing large capital projects. Okay, so a few things before we conclude. Please watch your email. If you enjoyed this webinar and you would like to join our next one, by all means, there's a link for you to do that in the emails that you'll receive. If you know of anyone else that you think should participate in this webinar, there's also a link to forward the Zoom meeting invite for next week's webinar to them. They can join next Friday and hear this discussion as well. And lastly, I'll send you the recording of this webinar. It'll be available tomorrow morning once Zoom is done processing a few items here. Feel free to watch it again, pass it on to anyone else who you think should hear this commissioning message that can benefit and help them and their projects succeed with commissioning, by all means. So lots of great questions in the chat. I appreciate everyone's involvement and thoughts and encouragement here. I just want to thank everyone for joining, and I hope to chat with you soon. Have a great weekend, and please stay safe on site on your projects. Bye for now.